Okay. So what I'm going to do today, I'll give a quick intro on what I'm going to be doing so that way you can kind of follow along, is we're going to be connecting to a data source that's completely unrelated to the out-of-the-box sources that typically come with the Executive Scorecard. We're doing this because obviously we get a lot of questions about that. It's like, look, hey, we've got a lot of data in our data warehouse, or we have other source systems out there. How can we use the Executive Scorecard in order to get access to that data and to bring that in and develop KPIs? So I'm going to show you in an hour what we're going to do is we're going to go and connect to a data source. We're then going to pull that data source up into the Executive Scorecard. We're then going to create an entire scorecard, and we're going to create 4 KPIs. And then once that's all done, we're then going to calculate those KPIs, and you'll be able to see the entire dashboard page all put together. So a lot of fun stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and start, and I'm going to start from the beginning. So let me just go ahead and start. The first tool that you'll be accessing is the Business Objects Designer. So before we get this into the Executive Scorecard, for those that are not aware, the Executive Scorecard comes bundled with the entire SAP Business Objects suite, and it uses that for a lot of components. One is even the out-of-the-box data extracts. It leverages the Business Objects Data Services component. What I'm logging into now is actually the Designer tool, which is where you create the universe. And this is really what allows you to connect your data source to the application. So it's that the metadata layer. So I logged into the Universe Designer. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to create a new universe. And the data source we're going to be using is ServiceNow. And what we've done is we already have a connector that we use for ServiceNow. We've already pulled this data into a data warehouse. And what we'll be doing is taking that data that has been moved from ServiceNow into our data warehouse and now using it to bring it up into the Executive Scorecard. So I have I'm going to call this universe ServiceNow, and the next thing I'm going to do is create a new connection to this data source. And we'll call this one ServiceNow as well. And we're going to pick the data source. It's going to be a SQL Server database. Again, this is our source data. And I'm going to connect to the data source. And put in the host name of that server where we have the database located. And the last step is to pick the database. And we'll test the connection. Okay, and now we have a connection. And then all we have to do is just finish setting up this connection. We'll hit finish. And now we've got our connection, and we have a basic universe ready to go. And now you get an empty page. Now what we're going to do is we're going to bring in a couple tables that we need in order for our KPI. So I right-click. I'm going to bring in a couple tables. Here's my database. It defaulted to ServiceNow. And all the tables are underneath the DBO owner. I'm going to select 2 tables. So for this demo, what we're going to do is we're going to create some KPIs specific around incidents. And this period table is actually, it's really just a calendar table. This helps us roll up the KPIs. In this case, they're all going to be a monthly KPIs. But certainly if you have quarterly, weekly, yearly metrics, you can certainly use that same calendar table in order to create those different roll-up KPIs. So now we have the 2 tables. 2 steps we have to do. One, we have to make a join for these 2 tables. And the next step is to just simply drag these over and make them available so we can then select the different table columns whenever we get to the point of creating the KPIs. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a join. And this will basically join the incident open date to the calendar table. And we're going to make a little modification here. So what this is doing is it's saying that if any incident, what I want to do is the period table, it's rolled up on a monthly level. So if I had an incident open in July, I want them to roll up to the month of July. So any incident that was opened greater than or equal to the start date of that calendar table or less than or equal to the end date. So it's July 1st to the last day of the month. And we'll parse this. And this will allow us to roll those up automatically. I'm going to go ahead and hit detect for the cardinality. Now this is going to be many-to-many, but this will get addressed in the executive scorecard. It's many-to-many because this calendar table has a set of records on a monthly basis. So it'll have, for example, July 30, 31 records. On a weekly basis, it'll have 7 records, and so there is a duplicate, but we're going to control that to where it's going to be a one-to-many relationship in the executive scorecard. So we'll do okay. Now all we have to do is to make these available, we'll drag these over, and it creates like a folder, and we're just going to clean this up. We're going to call this just period. It's just has all of our objects specific around the period. And then it has all of our incident information, which you should probably recognize. Again, think of this as help desk tickets, and it has issues and when it was open, when it was closed, the status of that ticket, etc. And we're just going to relabel this and call it incidents. Click apply. Now what we're going to do is we're going to save this. And we're going to call it service now and hit save. And now we're ready to export the universe. And so this is all you have to do in order to connect your data source to the universe. And this is basically the first step to get this into Executive Scorecard. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to export this universe. And what this does is this exports it. Again, we're in SAP Business Objects, and so it hasn't quite made it to the scorecard yet. This simply exports it from my desktop to the repository. The next step you have to do is there's a Jmx Console, which is what I'm opening up now. And this is where, once you log into this tool, and I've already logged in just to save a couple steps, whenever I load this metadata, what it's going to do is going to take that universe I just exported to Business Objects and pull it up into the Executive Scorecard and make it available, so then I can start using it to create my KPIs. This usually takes about, in this version, about 25 to 30 seconds to run. And I'll then get a pop-up that says OK, which means that it successfully pulled that universe, also known as a business context, into the Executive Scorecard. And it says the method success is out. Now, for good measure, I'm going to run this again because we have noticed with new universes sometimes it tends to act odd. So I just clicked it again to double check to make sure it did load. Now we can go right to the Executive Scorecard. So here's the front page. I'm going to log in, and we're going to go ahead and build a scorecard and develop some KPIs. Now it's loading the scorecard, and in this environment we have a number of pages. And today what we're going to be doing is creating a page just like this. So now what we want to do is we want to go into the studio, and this is really where you create all your KPIs. So select Studio. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a new scorecard. And we're going to give this a name. We'll just call it Service Now Demo. And select Create. Now what we're going to do is we're going to create perspectives. And we're going to create 2 perspectives. So if you can see back behind here, you have customer, operational excellence, IT value. These are the perspectives that make up the CAO scorecard. We're going to create 2 of these perspectives. The first one's going to be the customer. I'm going to create this. Now I'm going to come back up to the scorecard, and I'm going to create one more. And this one is going to be operational excellence. Okay, so now I have a basic scorecard. I have my scorecard. I have 2 perspectives. Now what I'm going to do is go back to customer, and we're going to create an objective here. And in this case, I just right-click, and I'm going to do new objective. And I'm going to start typing. This one's going to be improved service delivery. There's certain defaults. I'm going to take these. This is going to tell us that all the KPIs that make up this objective will be on a monthly basis, which is typically what you see. But I'm going to take the defaults. And I'm going to go ahead and come back up here, and I'm going to create one more objective underneath customer. So now I'm going to come down to the other perspective we created, and I'm going to create one objective here. So now I'm going to create my last objective, which is underneath the operational excellence perspective. And this is going to be improve responsiveness. So what I'm going to do next is we'll be creating a total of 4 KPIs, and we're going to then associate them to these different objectives. So click create. Okay, so now we have a basic scorecard. Now what we're going to do is we need to create a KPI. So unfortunately, you can't just right-click and hit create KPI. You have to go back up to an existing, either from an existing scorecard, or you can go to the KPI library, which I'm not going to tap into. And all we're going to do is we're going to take a KPI, doesn't matter which one, and we're going to clone this KPI, which basically just creates a copy of it. So I'm going to right-click and do clone. Now what we're going to do is we take this KPI and I'm going to drag it down. Oh, before I do that, I need to open up our scorecard. And I'm going to drag this KPI, we're going to move it down to the improved service delivery. We'll start there. And looks like I need to fix one thing first. Okay, give me 1 second. I need to republish something. So what I'm doing is I'm re-exporting the universe. It looks like it didn't quite take, and so I'm going to re-export this again. And then we should be fine with this error we keep seeing pop up. I'm going to go ahead and just close out the studio and we'll log back into the studio as soon as the business context, and it looks like it just finished. So now we should be able to go back in here and go back into the studio and continue. We'll go back into Studio. And let's go see if we can find that KPI we created. If not, we'll just create another one. Okay, we'll go ahead and just do another clone, because I think I forgot where I created the first one, so let's create another clone of a KPI. Looks like the issue went away, so we won't see that error. Now here's my clone, here's my original, and I'm on my clone. You'll notice it puts the number 0, and this will keep incrementing if you keep creating multiple copies. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this one, and we're going to move it down. into the improved service delivery. Okay, and now we're ready to start creating some KPIs. So I'm going to use this, think of it as a template. I'm now going to remove the original name. Okay, so the first KPI is going to be the average time to resolve an incident. So I'm going to give it a name. And the next thing we need to do is we need to set up the threshold. So we know this is going to be a monthly KPI. On the thresholds, this is going to be a minimize, right? Because what we want to do is we want to be able to have, it's going to be green as far as the lowest amount of time it takes to resolve an incident. So what we're going to put in here is if an incident is closed in the first 24 hours, it's considered green. If it takes up to a day and a half, it becomes a warning, and then anything over that, and we're just going to put this to 48 hours, it becomes red. Obviously, if it goes beyond 48, it'll still show up as red, but this just gives us the indicator. I'm going to hit save. And now we're going to go ahead and create the calculation for this one. So you'll notice I still have the old calculation from the KPI that I cloned. So I'll open up the formula builder. I'm sorry, let me cancel that. I need to do one last change. The first thing we need to do is we need to, so the KPI actually came from an ALM defect context. We need to change this to the service now because that way it'll look at the universe that we put out there. So if I scroll down, here's the universe that we just exported about 15 minutes ago. Click OK. And now I can come into the formula builder, and you'll notice it has incidence and period, which is the two class folders that we created earlier. Now we can get rid of this entire formula and create one that's specific to what we need. So in this case, it's going to be an average. So underneath the functions, there's an average function. And you'll notice it has a comma in the middle. And so we're going to go just to the left of that comma. And what we're doing is we're going to be counting the number of incidents. And so underneath the incident folder, all we have to do is come down to the number. So this is basically the ticket number. It's going to count how many tickets. And the next step is we just have to put in some kind of a filter. So I'm going to go to the right of the comma. I'm sorry, let me back up here. This is in the wrong one. This is going to be an average. And so what we want to look at is the resolution time. So if we come down here to resolution time, now this is in seconds, and so what we're going to have to do after we're going to convert this to hours, so I'll show you how to do that. So this is stored in the number of seconds it took to resolve that issue from the time it opened until the time it closed. And we're going to put the comma, and then it's going to be, we are only interested in the tickets that were closed. So what we want to do is we want to come up here to the state. Again, these names are dictated by the database. We could have easily changed the name. But the state is basically the status of that ticket. So I'm going to click on state, and it has to equal to closed. And so what it did is it queried the database, and it took all the incidents out there, and it gave us a list of values here in the executive scorecard. I'll select closed. Now what we need to do is we need to link this to the calendar, right? Because we want to be able to have a number for July, a number for June, however far back you have history, we want to be able to create a monthly value for that. So now what we want to do is we want to put an AND condition, and what we want to do is it's going to be the close date, which is up here in the same incident folder, and then now we're going to do something a little different. Underneath the date constants, they have something called in period. And what that does is that will allow us to create a calculation for each of those time periods on a monthly level. The last thing we need to do is, this is obviously going to give us something in seconds. We need to convert that to an hour, so we're going to divide this by 3,600 seconds, which is how many seconds are in an hour. And that's it. That's how easy it is to create a KPI. So I'm going to validate this to make sure there's no syntax errors. It'll tell me if there is. Formula validation passed successfully, so now I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to save this. Let me save this. And we can go ahead and test it just to see what we're going to get. And what it'll do is it's going to query for the month of July. And as you can see, it came back with, on average, if you look at all the tickets that were closed in the month of July, the average time to resolve those tickets were 19 hours and, just over 19 and a half hours. So it has a pretty good score. Again, it's within our threshold of 24 hours for green. Now, one last thing I didn't do, I'm going to go to configuration details, is this is actually in hours. And so what we want to do is, you can pick whatever you want as far as the selection. If they're not available, you can type in whatever you want. We're going to type in hours. And so whenever we calculate the KPI, we know this is actually looking at hours. We're going to save this. And so now we just completed the first KPI. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the same KPI, I'm going to clone it again. And I want to clone this one because this one's already pointed to the right universe or business context, and so this will save me a step. And this one we're going to give it a new name. So here's our second KPI. This is going to be the number of incidents opened. Okay. And I didn't take this out earlier. This is the description from the prior KPI. I'm not going to bother with descriptions for now. You can certainly add those. Now, since this is a number, we're going to change the unit to a pound symbol. Again, you can use it wherever you want. And this is going to be you need to change the threshold here. So this is going to be from 0 to 200 tickets. It's green. And then from 200 to 300 is considered warning, and anything over 300, we'll put 400 out here, would be considered red. And so this is really to help track the number of tickets and whether or not, how successful you are at closing out tickets that are opened. Again, there's other areas you can put this information in. I'm going to remove this because this was associated with a different KPI, just to keep this clean. And we're going to save this. Now we're going to go to the calculation tab for this KPI and open up. We don't need to change the context. It's already at the right one, ServiceNow. And we're going to remove this average time to resolve incident calculation. We're going to create a new one. This is going to be a count. So we're going to come here to the aggregating functions and click count. And what we're going to be counting is the number of incidents. So we're going to use the number, which is the ticket number. We're going to count those. And this one's a little more straightforward. All we want to do is look at the opened at is in period. And we're going to validate this to make sure there's no syntax errors. This looks fine. I'm going to save this. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create our third, if we have time we can do two more. Let's create our third KPI. I'm going to clone this one. Okay, now this one we're going to move it down to the improved customer satisfaction objective because it's going to be a little different KPI. So as we can see, we have our improved service delivery. We have our two KPIs here. Now in the next objective, we have our third KPI, and I'm going to give this a different name. And this is going to be the percentage of SLA met. And this is a percentage, so we'll change this from a pound to a percentage. Now this one's going to be a maximize because we want to be able to look at the on a rating from 1 to 100. And we're going to shift this a little bit. It's an SLA, and so anything that's in from 99 to 100% is considered green. Anything from 95 to 99 will be warning, and anything below 90 to 90, or anything below 95 is going to give you a red, right? So now we're going to save this. Looks good. And we're going to change, now we're going to go to the calculation tab and update this calculation. So this one's going to be a percentage. So I'll come up here to the percentage. This one's a little more involved. You notice that there's two comments, so there's multiple, basically you have a numerator and the denominator that we have to put in on this one. So this is going to be, we're going to count, it's going to be the number of tickets, so we'll use that, the ticket number again. Now we need to apply a filter. So we're only interested in those that met the SLA, right? So we have out in the database, there's a column called Met SLA, and we'll use that. So Met SLA equals 2. We'll get a list of values, either met it or didn't meet it based on however they're defined. So we only want the Met SLA incidents. And now we have to be able to join this to the monthly calendar. So we're going to put an AND condition. And what we're going to do is now we're going to go to the period class. And there's something called periodicity. And this is basically gives you monthly, weekly, quarterly. And this is going to, the periodicity has to equal, now I can certainly pick monthly here, but to make it a little more flexible, because this KPI could be used in other areas where it may not be monthly, it could be quarterly, is we're going to use, in the date constants, a KPI periodicity type. So what this is going to do is it's going to say, give me all the KPIs, it's a percentage of incidents that met the SLA, where the period is equal to the period of this objective. And remember, this was set to the monthly, and so that's how this would work. So if you have, maybe you have another objective out there that belongs to a different scorecard, and let's say you have an SLA met, but you want to look at it more at the granular level, maybe on a weekly level, you could use the same KPI, one at the monthly level here, and in a different scorecard, maybe at a manager level, where they're more interested in tracking it at a more detailed level, they can reuse the same KPI, but look at it at a weekly level. So this gives me the top. Now what I want to do is I'm going to, and I notice it has and in there twice, I'm going to remove that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to, one last thing we need to add in here. We have one more step. The period entity equals period, and this also helps to determine the period. For this, we're just going to select the entire class. Now to save time, I'm just going to copy this formula, because if you think about it, it's a ratio. So what you're doing is you're taking the number of tickets that met the SLA, and after the comma, you're dividing it based on, you'll notice there's no filtering. So it's the number of tickets that met the SLA divided by all the tickets that fall in that same time period. And that's what's going to give you your percentage. So now the last thing is to validate this to make sure we didn't create any issues, any errors. And it passed. So we'll do OK. And we'll save this, and we'll go ahead and test this KPI. Make sure it looks OK. And you'll notice it has 94% of the tickets met the SLA, which is below the threshold. So it's going to have a red score for the month of July. So one last KPI to create. We're going to clone this SLA KPI. And we're going to move this down to a different perspective, which is the operational excellence, and the objective is improve responsiveness. We're going to move it down here. And this will be the last KPI, and then we'll create the calculation and create the scorecard, which will only take a couple minutes to do that part. So our last KPI is going to be the percentage of first close resolution. Now, one thing with this is if you have a KPI, you can only have it with the same name once. And so I know we already have this out there. I've created for different demos. So I'm going to put SN representing ServiceNow first close resolution just to help differentiate that. So this is a percentage, so we can leave this as a percentage. And for our thresholds, we need to change these a little bit. So we're going to set these to 80. And this will be 70, and this is going to be 60. So basically the goal is we want to be able to close at least 20% of our tickets, or anything above 80%, on that initial call. And that's what this is going to be tracking, is how successful are you at closing those tickets. We'll save this. Now what's great about these is, over time, you can continue to strengthen those thresholds. And so you may start off initially at 80%. As your process improves, you can then go back in here and adjust this to maybe 85% or even, or I'm sorry, at 85% and move it up to make it more rigorous. You can do that as well. So now I'm going to go to calculation, and we'll do the last calculation here. Okay, so this is going to be a percentage. Come back up to the aggregating functions. And we're going to use the number again, the ticket number, the percentage of tickets. And what we're looking for is, I'm going to move just to the left of the first comma, which is where we're going to be putting in our filter. And down here, there's something called first close resolution, or maybe up top, it's all alphabetical. Here it is, first close resolution, equal to. Now I know that if it's a 1, it means it met it was resolved on the first call. If it was a 0, it meant that they were not able to resolve it on the first call and it required additional feedback, or it was basically not resolved on that first call. So we're going to do 1. And now we need to put in the time period. So we're going to do and. Time period is our period. You minimize incidents, go to the period. And the periodicity, like we did earlier, equals, I'll do it differently this time just to show you that it really doesn't matter. I'm going to go ahead and just pick monthly. And then the period entity is the next one. Equals the period. Now I'm going to copy this. So there's your denominator in the numerator. So it's going to, again, it's a ratio, just like the SLA. It's the percentage of first close resolution divided by all the tickets in that same time period. And we're going to validate this, make sure I didn't make any mistakes. Okay. Now we're ready to calculate these and build a scorecard. So I'm going to save this, save all my changes. So now to calculate, you can come in here, it doesn't matter where you are, and you can right click on any of these objects, and you'll get a window. You can calculate from here, hit recalculate. Now what this does is it actually calculates at the context of the universe level. So all the KPIs that are associated to that universe or business context is going to get calculated. Even though I only picked, you'll notice I selected percentage of first close resolution, it'll actually calculate all 4 of those KPIs we created. So we're going to select ServiceNow, And I only have a few months of data, so I'll just go back to the beginning of the year. You can certainly go back farther and calculate. This takes, I don't think it takes more than 5 to 10 seconds to run, and so we can immediately, while that's running, we're going to go build our scorecard. So we're going to get out of the studio. And we're going to create a new page. And let's set it up a little bit. So once you, on a blank page, this is where you can come in here and you have the freedom to do whatever you want. And so I'm going to create a few different windows here. I'm going to switch this to horizontal to vertical, and you'll notice this little icon changed. What this allows me to do is split the window into two. So I'll put my scorecard on the left, and then down here I want to be able to split this one more time. And we'll populate this with 3 different components. So I'm now going to come up here to add component, or I can also come over here to the main toolbar and add a component here. Same thing, you'll get a list, and I'm going to put, you have different components. The scorecard, I'm going to drag it over to my window on the left, and I'm going to come to the KPI view and move this a little bit. The KPI view, that's basically your KPIs. We're going to put that over here, and then we're going to put the history down below. And now let's see what this looks like. We're going to close this. Now all we have to do is tell it what scorecard we want to display, and we have a scorecard. So I'm going to come up here to, oh, looks like this didn't grab the scorecard. Let me bring it back in again. There we go. Close back. Now you'll notice we have a different toolbar. They're very small, but there's a little filter up here that says configure this component. And this is where we're going to pick the scorecard we just created. And we call it Service Now Demo, I believe. And my screen resolution is kind of cutting it off, but down here you can default this to different things. For example, if you have a scorecard that only has data through maybe Q1, you can actually default it to a specific date. Otherwise, the default is it'll go to the current time period, which happens to be July. So I'm going to do OK, and here's our scorecard that has our KPIs. So if something as simple as this, I can certainly come in here and configure this to show specific KPIs when I first log into the scorecard. But even if I didn't want to do that, I can immediately click on the objective, and here's that first KPI we created, percentage of SLA met. If I select the KPI, my history, here's all my history, so it went back and calculated the percentage of SLA for each month that we have data. You'll notice they're all different. And if I select a different objective, I think there's 2 here. Here's our incidents. Again, I can select the KPI, and I get all my history. If I wanted to find more information, I can certainly double-click on this, which you'll notice it opens up the Explorer tab. And from here, you can kind of get more information. Some things you can do is, underneath additional info, you can certainly develop reports, business object reports. It doesn't matter what kind of a report, if it's web-based. You can add those as a hyperlink here that can allow you to drill from this KPI to give you more detail about that KPI. And you can add as many links there as you want. You'll notice it has our history. So we just saw earlier. You can also change the view from Explorer in the Explorer tab to look at it on a bar chart. So again, we did all this in 30 minutes or so. It didn't take very long. The last one, it has a grid which shows you month over month whether it's been trending up or down. If we come to the calculation, again, you can see it's read-only, but it shows us the calculation we created for an end user so they can kind of understand how it's calculating. It shows us the current threshold, what they're set to. And the last one is a goal map, which is pretty cool because if you have a KPI and it's associated to multiple scorecards, this will actually create an entire tree, and it'll break off into different branches. And so if this is being tracked at the CIO level, down to a VP, down to a director and a manager, this will track all that KPI and which scorecard that they're associated to. It keeps track of all that. And let me just show you the last one, and I think we'll open this up for questions. The last one we have is our first close resolution. We have 88.6%. And here's my history for that one. month over month. So again, if you come in and you do a deployment with Scorecard and you have 2 years worth of data, you can immediately, by creating these KPIs, have up to 2 years worth of history displayed on the scorecard.